This is concept question 3.22 on your chapter 23 homework, and it's basically just testing our ability to read and understand a graph of average total cost, marginal cost, and marginal revenue, where the horizontal axis is output and the vertical axis is price or cost per unit. So it tells us to use this graph on the right, which shows marginal revenue, marginal cost, and average total cost curves for a perfectly competitive firm, and to identify the firm's profit maximizing price quantity combination, label that E, and then second, to use a rectangle to identify the firm's profit and label that profit. So I'm going to magnify the graph here so we can work with it a little more easily. So the first thing is to recall the definitions of each of these things. So the average total cost is the average cost per unit of output, right? So if we choose to output 4 products, then our cost per unit is going to be looks like right at about 4. So if I come up to the average total cost curve and go over to the price, so it's the cost axis. So the cost per unit when we output 5 units is right about $4 per unit. So our total cost in that sense is 4 times 5, which is 20. So that's average total cost. Marginal cost is a measure of the extra cost that you incur just by adding that last unit on. So when we decide to output 5 products, our marginal cost of that 5th one looks like about 6. So when we chose to produce only 4, we produced it cost us $6 less than if we produce 5, because the cost of that 5th one is that marginal cost at 5, which was about 6. So it cost us $6 more to produce 5 products than if we had only produced 4. And lastly, the marginal revenue. This is how much revenue or how much money we bring in from selling an additional unit. So when I sell my 5th unit, I get $6 for that 5th unit. So selling 5, I have $6 more in my pocket than I would have if I had sold 4. So that's the definitions of all 3 of these curves. And of course you can review those in your book for more information or for more details on those concepts. So using those 3 concepts and this graph of those concepts, the first thing we have to do is use the point drawing tool to identify the firm's profit maximizing price quantity combination and label that E. So I'm going to click my little point tool here, and let's think about what that means. If you're going to maximize your profit, the rule that the book gives us and the rule that economists use and business people use is that you want your marginal cost to equal your marginal revenue. And we can think about why, because so that seems to happen right about here where those 2 curves cross, right? Where those 2 are equal. Marginal cost equals our marginal revenue right here. And we're supposed to label that E. Okay? But why is that the case? So if you think about if I produced fewer products or sold fewer products than that, then I could make more money if I just produced 1 more, right? So if I sold 4, the cost of that 4th one is only $4, it looks like. But my revenue for that 4th one is $6. So if I can produce 1 more and produce 5 of our product, then I can get to a point where I can make $6 more. But if I produce more than that, if I go above that and try to produce 6, now that 6th one costs me way up here on the marginal cost curve, it cost me something like $8, and I only got from that 6 my marginal revenue curve, which is $6. So now I'm spending more to make my 6th product than I am getting from that 6th product. So I definitely don't want to produce more than that at that point, because then I'm starting to lose money. I'm starting to cost myself more money than I'm getting back from that additional product. So to maximize our profit, we want to produce exactly the amount that is where our marginal cost equals our marginal revenue. So in this case, that would be right about here. So right about 5 and 6. So I'm going to actually go up here and edit coordinates. When you're having trouble putting in the exact, getting the dot right on the point that you're trying to get to, you can always click that edit coordinates and use that to put the dot where you want. So I want it to be at 5 and 6. So I can do that, submit that. So that's our profit maximizing equilibrium price quantity combination. So the next part asks us to use a rectangle drawing tool to identify the firm's profit and label it profit. So think about what profit is. Profit is the amount of money that you make minus the amount of money that you spent. So the amount you bring in minus the amount that went out, right? So your revenues minus your costs. So we'll think about that as our revenue, which is this guy, the blue line, minus our costs, which is the black line, when we produce 5 products. So when I produce 5 of my products, my marginal revenue now is $6 for each of those products. So what I'm bringing in per product is $6, which means my total revenue is that 5 times 6, right? So for each of those 5 products, I'm getting $6. So my total revenue then is $30, or 5 times 6, which also, if you think about it geometrically, that 5 times 6 is also the area of this rectangle, right? Because that's the length of the bottom, which is 5, times the height, which is 6, length times height. That would be the area of this rectangle here. So that's the amount that we bring in, our revenue for 5 products, is this rectangle, this whole rectangle here. So what about our cost? At 5, when we're producing 5, our average total cost, remember that's this black curve, is at this point right here. So what is our total cost? Our total cost is the average total cost times the number of products that we're producing, right? So that would be our 5 times this height here, which is a little bit more than 4, it looks like. So that, in fact, if we drew a line across from here over to this axis, then our total cost geometrically is the area of this rectangle, right? Because it's that 5 products, which is the length of the bottom, times that average total cost, which is this height here of this rectangle that ends right here, right? So now, if we want to think about our total profit, remember our total profit is our revenues minus our costs. And we just said that our revenue is this whole big rectangle here from the 5 and the 6, and that our cost is this smaller rectangle going across from the average total cost curve at 5 units, so from here and down. So the part that is our revenue minus our cost is all of the revenue rectangle that's above that cost line. Does that make sense? So I'm going to draw that with the rectangle as they asked me to. So I'm going to put the corner of this rectangle right here, which is the top corner of my cost rectangle. And I want to go up to the top corner of my revenue rectangle. And now I want to move this so that it's not overlapping with anything. And I'm going to say that's my profit. Okay, so now that we've got it rectangle, the rectangle shaded in, maybe it's easier to see what I'm talking about here. So our average total cost is wherever that for those 5 units is that at the place on the average total cost curve where we've got 5 units, right? So this is my average total cost. Average total cost times the number of products that we have, which is 5, gives me my total cost. So that's this rectangle, the white rectangle here, because that's my 5 total output times this height, which is the cost, average cost. So the rectangle here is my cost. The whole big rectangle is my revenue, because that's the number that I sell times the price that I get for each one, right? So the whole big rectangle is my revenue from selling or producing 5 products. And so the difference between those is my profit. My revenue, the big rectangle, minus my cost, the small rectangle, and what's left over is my profit, which is the green rectangle. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions about that, feel free to come by my office hours.